It's all killer, no filler. I'm Eric here with an episode of the D2C podcast that we are digging up from our archive, episode 62 of Jordan Gordon's email and retention podcast, the world's best email and retention marketing podcast. If you're not listening to it, make sure you go and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. For this episode, we're going back to episode number 62, which is all about where should that click go, trying to decide how you should parse your traffic from your home page, your landing pages, your PDPs, and on and on. A lot of times we obsess over exactly what to do about how to drive a click with your ad, but we're not always as cognizant about where we should send that traffic after the fact. This podcast dives deep, and I hope you enjoyed Jordan Gordon and Taylor Cain breaking it all down for you. We will be back with our regular scheduled programming next week, and until then, have a happy new year and a great 2026, and on with the show.
In the inbox late night, glowing screen, see the light. Email, everything feels alright.
When is it a good time to build a landing page rather than just driving to somewhere on the site? What are the things you think about when you're thinking about where to insert it in the ecosystem and who you might be speaking to?
It's a chance to really refine the first impression and the message you want someone to walk away with after they drive that click off your ad. Prices are rising everywhere. There's likely a lot more consideration happening in general. So more and more, there's becoming a use case to really make sure that you're hitting that key message that you want.
We have all these theories and hypotheses, but only when you run it do you know.
This episode is brought to you by Contentful. Marketers, you know that feeling when your creative clicks, when that social post sends engagement through the roof, when your outside of the box campaign hits ROI positive, when a personalized homepage turns prospects into customers? It's utter marketing bliss. Contentful helps you create tailored omni-channel experiences without working overtime. No stress, no limits, only possibilities. Get the feels at contentful.com.
It's the world's best email and retention podcast, and I'm your host, Jordan Gordon. We are a member of the DTC network of podcasts and the philosophical home of the Pilothouse email and customer retention team. If you want to make the sweet nectar of low-cost revenue a large part of your digital ecosystem, then follow us on your favorite podcast app today. This time, I am joined by Taylor Cain, who is an e-com strategist here at Pilothouse. He also has a bunch of other roles he's done here. He's a veteran, and we are going to discuss landing pages broadly. So before we jump into it, hey, Taylor, great to have you on the pod. And why don't you tell us a little bit about your path that brought you to Pilothouse and introduce yourself to the audience?
Yeah, thanks for having me, Jordan. It's great to be here. I've been in marketing about a decade, got my start in the affiliate space, doing a lot of fun app advertising type stuff, and then wanted to get into the fun world of e-com and D2C, and jumped over to the Pilothouse team back in our early days. And since then, held a number of roles. My main background has been on the media side, the performance delivery and media buying side of things, but I've also been pretty heavily involved in a lot of our CRO philosophy and understanding a lot of different technical type roles too, and being involved in supporting our team when it comes to that, and as far as driving growth for the brands we work with.
There are actually a lot of people around here who got kind of that start doing kind of app affiliate stuff. It's like maybe a Victoria, BC kind of thing. But yeah, lots of guys, I'd say, in your kind of age group. I remember some time ago, I was an affiliate manager for a year or something like that along in my career. It just fell in my lap, but certainly not really my thing at all. But I do recall when there was a little chat going around at a party when someone said, hey, someone made $1 million selling the Make It Rain app, where you hold your phone up and you go like that. And if you go like that fast enough, you make it rain, and the phone, and they sold $1 million worth of apps.
That's crazy. I mean, I still remember like one of my formative experiences in tech as a kid, or like in middle high school, was when like early iPhone days, like with the beer app, like just drinking like that thing, like with my friends. So that's hilarious. I love that someone profited that heavily off that.
Oh, there's so much garbage online, right? Anyway, like the reason that I had you on here, I guess, let me just intro a bit out there in audience land. as everyone knows here, recently our team kind of merged together with the existing CRO team at Pilothouse. And what do I bring to that? I've been working on websites in one way or another for 25 years, but we got some people on the team who've been, grinding very specifically at Pilothouse. And as I was kind of getting abreast of all this, of course, I noticed that we've got a team that has been just quietly and steadfastly producing hundreds of landing pages a year. And also, Taylor, I mean, just even from a recent meeting we were on, people were exemplifying you as someone, you and your team are just great at kind of briefing for that and figuring out where, it can go, fit into a digital ecosystem, who you'd be talking to. And I don't bring too many Pilothouse people on the show because I don't want to, I already talk my own book enough. But in this case, it'd be nice to bring you on here to help our audience think about when is it a good time to build a landing page rather than just driving to somewhere on the site, and kind of, and beyond just when is it the right time, what are the things you think about when you're thinking about where to insert it in the ecosystem and maybe who you might be speaking to? So really broad question, when and why would you start building a landing page?
I think it's nice to start with the who, because like a lot of my background comes from paid social specifically, where you are at the heart of it, disrupting someone's journey and then bringing them into your brand experience, trying to make them understand like why they should really engage with you and purchase from you ultimately, especially if they had no idea who you were from a prospecting perspective. So a landing page, it's a chance to really refine the first impression and the message you want someone to walk away with after they drive that click off your ad, because your ad is going to engage them in some way or another. When they go to the next step, they want to understand a little bit more. And there are cases where, it makes sense to go to the website and give them a broad shopping experience directly and try to capture them there. But there are also cases where you might have a message that it's harder to have that come across super clearly unless you direct them through it. And then you want to guide them through a very sequenced or designed flow. That to me is really what is at the crux of it when you go from who you're speaking to and kind of where you go there. So that's the challenge with it. There's a lot of different places people come from, right? Like it might be their second touch point. It might be their fourth touch point. You might have a really high consideration product. You might have like a very quick buy, quick fire decision product. And that's when there's a lot of nuance that comes into this, and understanding what is the checklist you should go through to determine if a landing page makes sense to test, given the investment in building it as well.
Yeah, and you said this phrase there that I noticed, disrupting their journey. And so ultimately, this is like saying we're going to add a click before they get to the PDP or the category page or whatever it is. The conventional wisdom is remove all the clicks. That's what one-click shopping is. One-click shopping is remove all the clicks and get them to buy in a click. And so in some cases, it's a quick buy. In some cases, it's a lot of consideration. My guess is if it's a lot of consideration, that's probably where you'd be more likely to use a landing page. Is that right?
Correct. Yeah. And I think with like when you think of the ecosystem for the broad consumer nowadays too, like prices are rising everywhere. Like when you think of purchasing power and how that's changing for people, there's likely a lot more consideration happening in general. Brands also typically want to run at higher prices because it gives you more flexibility with your margins and whatnot too. So more and more, there's becoming a use case to really make sure that you're hitting that key message that you want right away. The nice thing about a landing page is it provides you with that level of flexibility to be able to say, hey, here's my homepage. Here's the message on my homepage. It's kind of our it might be our brand identity or something, but I want to be a little bit more direct response when I'm coming off that disruptive ad journey. So I'm going to take that and tweak it and massage that messaging to be a little bit more direct, knowing that I need to really get this key point across, or I want to test this key point relative to it to see if that resonates. And so that's usually where that starts to come into play.
Yeah, so you mentioned the homepage there, and this is actually, everybody out in audience land, there's something I've been putting together that I want to bring to you. A model for this, similar to like around that episode 40 area where I was talking about really modeling out email as part of the digital ecosystem. So this is a little piece of that that's coming to you, but let's just talk about homepage for a second. And let's say that two very core functions of homepage were to, and maybe one's above the fold and one's below the fold, right? But show the key product and drive to the PDP. And then the next one would be like maybe something like show explain the brand promise, maybe more lifestyle imagery, and drive to a top category page. And so, on that one, you're letting them self-select. On one, we know we want them to buy this product. That would be like the simplest, most basic kind of journey that you'd be doing off homepage. That above the fold on the homepage, you're really only getting like a headline. Maybe you're going to squeeze in a subhead. Maybe. It gets a lot of traffic though. Tons of traffic to the homepage. So when you've got scarce resources, is there a way that you're going to, because there's so much free traffic to that homepage, is there a way that you think about, hey, when is it actually, should we be kind of refurbishing what we already got, rather than doing this separate path?
Yeah, and I think the easiest way to look at it is I'm a numbers guy, like coming from a media buying background. So I always start with what are my core KPIs looking like and what can I influence? So, your standard ones like your traffic cost, your conversion rate, and your AOV. Because like when you're thinking about like what you're getting out of that, those are the ones to combine. In a lot of cases, like it's that conversion rate where you're seeing it just not live up to what you want. And like, sure, you can go after like lower cost traffic on one end, but what's that going to do to the other side of it? And then AOV is typically pretty long tail and involves product or other complex CRO processes coming into play too. So often if you look and you're like, okay, I think what's really holding me back from being able to scale up at the numbers I need, usually it's going to be somewhere in that conversion rate zone. And that's when you feel like there's something being left on the table in that regard. That's typically when you start to go into what's missing from the message, right? Because it might very well be that you can change something pretty quickly on the homepage. You could test something quickly on the homepage. But to your point, there's not a lot of real estate. That's also where you want that core brand message to be. So if you do want to play a bit outside the lines in that and test some things, it's tough to do it there, especially as you're, for anybody working with like the, bigger brands with more team members involved and all the processes behind it. So landing pages are a really nice intermediary for that when it comes to being able to refine your messaging and make it more direct.
Also, when we think about that, we just talked about using a landing page as opposed to homepage and driving to that same top PDP, for instance, super common play. Well, what about actually just testing a new PDP, right? You know what I mean? We can really remake any page. So is there a time when you're like, hey, actually, I think what we need is just to run a PDP against this PDP?
Yeah, 100%. So typically like it is different brand to brand and based on a lot of nuances, but often the example with a landing page, I love this example because early on, working with a brand that was trying to find its identity and how it showed up in ads and then converted all the way through to drive the results it wanted, we learned pretty quickly that there was a lot of value in communicating the message around cross-selling and upselling before someone saw the price. So that was a really interesting psychological and messaging kind of learning that we gained, because it was basically saying like, hey, if people land and they see the price right away, they get scared, especially if we're upselling it immediately out of the gate. But there was more power in the message when we told them how the product worked, why it would benefit them, and why they should consider getting the complementary ones with it to get the most value out of it, even though the price or cost is higher. And that ended up converting better when we unlocked that, but we couldn't scare people off with the price right away. We had to make sure they knew that, they were pausing, they were taking the moment to understand that. And so like that's one really powerful example of it, I think. And you can kind of start to imagine like what brands tend to benefit more from that kind of messaging based on what they're offering to customers. But
that's really interesting. And did you show them the bundle price? Let's call it a bundle price, whatever it was. Did you show them the bundle price afterwards, or did you show them the individual unit price afterwards?
We would then go into the bundle price afterwards, but we would pair it off with all your classic, like, here's what you get, like, here's how much you're saving, here's like why it's better to do this, all the classic messaging.
Like I'd invite anybody in the audience to go back and check out the Dynamite episode we ran on cognitive biases. We also, we've ran a couple of episodes like that. Also when the Aves was on that we discussed, kind of human psychology, consumer psychology. But interestingly, like anchoring, you just described anchoring. The second you show the price, that's the price. It's in their head. Hey, I'm paying $300 and that's it. And then you want to convince them to spend $5? It's just a really big uphill battle. So great, classic play that fits right into how the World's Best Email Retention podcast has presented. Yeah, a lot of our stuff.
So like, for example, if I guess to take that a little bit further, like if you're evaluating conversion rate and you're like, oh, my PDP has a better conversion rate at a comparable amount of traffic, so it's stat sig relative to the data I have, but I think I could take it further. And you look at it and you're like, that might be why people are maybe getting scared off because they don't understand the value before they see the cost. We've seen a lot of success in the past from doing direct A/B testing of PDPs with and without the price, and the price shows up at checkout. And that's like getting into more, I feel like, old school stuff you don't see as commonly now, but it can be really powerful. And like that's a simple A/B test where I would argue that PDP without the price is in fact a landing page because you're trying to drive a certain message that's different than your standard website flow.
Although, could you add directly to cart from that? Not PDP? Or did you have to go to the PDP afterwards?
You could add to cart from it.
Yeah.
So
it's like it's a thin PDP, right? It's got everything but the price.
Exactly. And there could be a negative to that too, depending, right? Like then consumers might be like, maybe there's a trust component. So like there are a lot of considerations at all times. So this is why landing pages are great for giving you that flexibility to test.
Yeah, and also that's important, is like an important point of all this, maybe we can move into, is how iterative we must be, because we have all these theories and hypotheses, but only when you run it do you know. And you know what? This happens all the time. I have, people from my team, maybe they're kind of fresher out of college and they're like, oh yeah, but this works like this, because they read it somewhere. And it's like, yeah, you know what? That worked like that for whoever that guy tested it on. And then he went on X, formerly Twitter, and said, this is how it works. And you read that. And it's like, now it's etched in your brain. Like, that's how this works. And it's like, the variance is crazy. So how, maybe just have a little bit, we actually use a custom tool, by the way, everybody out there. We use a tool that helps us iterate faster on landing pages. But everybody else in the audience who's listening and maybe trying to think about, hey, I want to add a couple landing pages into my ecosystem, like any advice you have to just save them time and just get them so that they're in a good situation as quickly as possible for testing and iteration wise.
Yeah, definitely. Like when it comes to what tool you're choosing, if you're starting fresh and trying to figure out what to look at, anything that integrates really seamlessly with your store and where you can focus on whatever the top objective of your landing page is. If it, for example, is to figure out what message converts following an ad. If you choose a tool that integrates with your Shopify store really cleanly, can integrate products fast, and you can and has like readily available templates or anything like that, that can be a really quick way to start getting some insights and seeing, is this justified and should I keep going down this path? Is it going to drive a big enough difference to performance? I think eventually as you go forward, there's a lot more you can do. And as brands continue to get bigger and bigger, they tend to dive into those crazy customizations, lots of different cool features, which can be powerful at the right time and place. But really my POV, it all starts with what your core objective is and what your why is for creating it. And you can ask yourself that by reviewing it and going through the standard process to look at why you think things are working or they aren't, and then go from there. And if you're looking for like a quick landing page message kind of starting point, a lot of the time, like the types of messages you hear about in CGC video or UGC video, they can translate to landing pages too, and you can turn it into a very clean reading experience where someone goes down the page. So like a certain number of reasons why kind of landing page, I've seen that consistently beat home pages out from a conversion rate perspective.
Which one is that?
Saying like three reasons why you should choose this brand or buy our products, basically.
And you just run that as the page. Yeah.
Yeah. And it benefits you in other ways too, right? Because if you find you can always A/B test the reasons, you can A/B test the headline, you can understand what is it and verify your hypotheses on like what brings someone in and how that performance comes about. Because to your point, Jordan, there's so much we like to think we know as marketers, and we can root it all in best practices. But time and time again, I will find that like running an ad for a certain product that then links out to, like, you run an ad for a certain product. It might be like a really fun color of the product or a really fun like new product. And then people go and they buy a different product and you see the sales spike for something else. And you're like, okay, we just learned something really interesting and it was not what I thought or intended. Like it's an ego check every day, right?
It's especially one of the things that I enjoy about this podcast is really trying to boil down what we do in theory. One, because this podcast, we talk quite openly. I said this, we talk openly about a lot of the stuff that we do. We do hold some things, like some key insights to ourselves because it's our alpha, but most of the stuff we just give away. And if there's anybody out there in audience land who's like trying to figure out how to do this for themselves, the first thing you need is a theoretical framework, or you're just taking shots in the dark. You need to have some map of where you're getting, right? But in practice, theory doesn't matter. Right? Right? So be ready for some to drive around some weird things on that path. Just a couple things that came up when I was thinking through this. One, we had Abby as well on the pod, and she talked about how she, working with some of our email players, they'll take good emails and turn them into landing pages. Be like, well, that email rocked. Let's just take that email, turn it into a landing page, because part of our process is we think at least a high intent email is a shoppable landing page. So they just convert into landing pages. So any other and you mentioned a really scrappy thing you can do there. And hey, you know what? Scrappy is the name of the game. So can I possibly pull another scrappy idea out from you?
Ooh, I like that. A scrappy idea. One of the big wins that people probably miss quite a bit, and I think a lot of brands don't pay as much attention to this as they should. And I'm going a little bit down a rabbit hole, so stop me if you need me to. But when you mention email as well, I think one of the biggest things that people tend to overlook is how valuable driving signups for your brand are from channels like paid social. If you can get enough interest to get someone to sign up, and you can play around with like making sure that I think it's not really scrappy, but one of the biggest things is making sure you've got your top performing pop-up and like email sign up option on your landing page. Like that is a huge checklist component, because you can track in Meta the number of leads you're getting from your ads, and then you can triangulate that with how that triggered revenue is playing out in when you send the campaign or they go through your flows. So like that is one big thing that I think is really powerful and all that.
It's low hanging fruit, right? Are there ever any kind of landing page tools that you find it's difficult to get that pop-up to pop, or is it usually out there it's pretty damn easy to get it to pop?
It's usually pretty solid to get it to pop. And I think like usually they have like the ability to integrate the code export into it. So majority now you can do that. But sometimes there can be bugs, of course, and whatnot. And if that's the case, I definitely encourage trying to work with any good apps support team if it's related to Shopify or a third-party vendor. Just work through that with them for sure.
By the way, quick shout out to the audience for Aaliyah, which was a tool that we're using a lot of now. And we just had Sean, their CEO and founder, on the podcast a few episodes ago. Everybody go check that out if you want to get some awesome ideas on how to get pop-ups to work. No financial relations. He didn't pay to be on the podcast, everybody. I brought him on because we use the tool, right? And we're happy with it. So I'm just sharing that with you for the good of e-commerce in general. We talked on a couple of super simple funnels there for a second, which is like, you got homepage to best-selling PDP, and then homepage to top category, and then from there, any PDP, right? And that kind of funnel ends on, did they end up on a PDP after ending on the top category? Of course, a funnel is PDP to cart, but that's actually, that funnel is taken care of directly in Shopify. You can go and you can just look at your add to cart rate. If you see more add to carts, that funnel is easy to measure. And then we talked about two replacements, which is, let's just call it an unaware landing page, like problem unaware landing page, probably a 2-category page, problem aware or solution aware landing page, probably going to the PDP, like super broad stuff, right? And just kind of these, let's just call those 5 funnels. And I want to bring this in a little more structured way to the audience in a couple of episodes. But here's a question for you as I'm doing this. Do you ever look at that set of funnels or some similar set of funnels that you kind of work through? Do you ever look at what share of the total site traffic are these, to say like, I don't even need to focus on these because it's total soup what's going on with this site? Or it looks like there's enough going through these funnels, and interest. And this is now, we're no longer talking about landing pages. We're talking about something else, but it's just evolving. But like, and if it's the right size, if it's a big enough, we're going to do what we're talking about. Hey, let's insert a landing page. Let's test a PDP. What happens when those core funnels, how do you approach when they're not enough of the total site business to actually be worth optimizing? How do you then approach improving e-com revenue? That's a tough one, right?
It's a good question. Yeah, you're kind of moving over into the other zones too, because I think first to start, like I'm a big fan and believer in, like, a lot of people talk about stat sig, and like the reality of it for a lot of businesses is it's tough to align to traditional stat sig amounts, or like whatever person X decided was stat sig. So I'm a big fan of setting expected and then measuring the outcome against it. So often when I'm running like a new meta creative test, for example, to use that example, I might even go as low as like, I'm looking for 10 purchases. And if I got 12, I see potential. I'm not saying it's like, this is now my new scale winner for the account I'm spending 6 figures a day with, but I'll graduate it to the next phase. And then I'll keep going and I'll keep going. And I keep using that methodology all the way through, because there is an element of the reality of trying to make sure you're getting performance, anchoring in like risk reduction as you go up and moving through all of that. So moving that over to your question, I think typically I would approach it through a balance of priorities amongst everything, right? Because if you don't find a win with that, then you can probably ask 3 new questions about why that outcome seems to be that, and then dive deeper into those and reprioritize. And that's typically how I would approach it. You prompted a thought too, which is that the other part of landing pages that can be incredibly valuable, and this is a little bit of an aside or kind of bonus tidbit, is when you're testing a new channel, for example, like you might want to go try, let's say like some DSP type channel is like the hot new thing everyone's talking about. And you're like, cool, I can get like 5-cent CPCs. And I'm like, in my head, if I hear 5-cent CPCs, I'm like, what's the quality going to be? And how's that going to affect my site as a whole? Potentially like my SEO, like a bunch of other stuff. Landing pages are a really nice intermediary for taking the pressure off your site data from dropping and then creating muddy data, and instead being able to isolate and do that. So you can kind of see where I'm going with it, where I go back and forth a bit. CVR might be the initial issue. We decide to test some landing pages. We typically would start with a couple of contrasting styles to give ourselves the best shot to see a lift. If we see the lift, great, we keep going with it. If we don't, we'll reevaluate and look at what's happening across the board and where should we prioritize our time.
Look, one way I kind of deal with that, but not with huge confidence, right, is looking at the direct traffic and direct conversion rate in Shopify, because it should be removing, we sent in this bad traffic source from over here, because it should be when someone types your domain into their browser. But we all know that direct is not everybody just typing the domain into the browser. So my question for you is, would you ever use the direct traffic and conversion rate in Shopify?
Oh, I'm a huge, and I don't know if I'm unique in that, but I use Shopify's refer and UTM breakdowns like daily. Because I will filter out channels that I know we're testing from the other data to look at how things look. You can also, like, that's a great place to go to. I love it because it's not perfect, right? Like, a lot will show up in none, a lot will show up in direct, to your point, like, and you really can't, you have to estimate at that point. But it is nice at the same time for what does show up to be able to say, okay, like, this is my revenue source. Like, there's an order ID here that just totally makes sense with this. And I'll go compare the landing page report and try to gather what I can, while taking it with a grain of salt, of course.
Yeah, I've also gone in there before. By the way, audience, it's like marketing and attribution inside of Shopify. I've gone in there sometimes and been like, it's like, whatever, 10 million annual revenue. And you look at it and you're like, well, everything in here is 100,000. It all adds up to 100,000. So we're missing 90% of the data. And in those cases, I usually just walk away from it and go somewhere else. Because I'll just get the data from somewhere else. But, like, have you ever experienced that? And, do you know what's causing that?
Yeah, there's different things. So, like, sometimes it'll be like if you're using a certain theme and it doesn't pass through the UTM data that you're looking for, like, that can happen. There are stores I've gone into, like, we'll onboard a client and I'll look and I'll be like, wait, I was really hoping I could see this and I can't. And then, you have to investigate deeper. But I think, to your point, that's exactly it. Like, and when that happens, you step away, you reevaluate your sources, and you find the next one that makes sense. For me, often that's going to be looking at the best incremental attribution type setting in like a GA or the platform itself, like Meta, if I'm not using an MTA tool like a Triple Whale or Northbeam.
Is there a to get a little bit more, we've been very theoretical here, again, building a framework for people to just think about how to approach this. Is there like just a concrete, like, cool without maybe listing the brand, maybe just being a little general on who it is, just a cool landing page that you've been working with recently, so people can wrap their minds around what might make a landing page work well?
Yeah, we've got we've got a few super cool ones. One that comes to mind is we worked with one of our partners, like a really cool landing page building platform that you're familiar with, in designing a really, really powerful extended PDP collection style of landers. So it basically starts with an image that we hand selected at the top, really concise messaging to the offer, moves you through some of the core benefit messaging that we want, and then it gives you the ability to shop the collection underneath. So basically what we're doing is we're forcing someone through the message that we want them to gather, and then they get to the shopping experience all in one journey, which is really powerful. So that's one of my favorites. Another one is like we rebranded a top landing page that was beating the homepage for another client that started performing twice as well, like from early signal, which was super cool. So updated the imagery with a messaging concept that we knew worked to really bring in some really cool lifestyle components. So yeah, there's a lot you can do.
Was that first landing page you discussed, was that built on niche? Is that what it was?
Yep.
Yeah. So, I mean, yeah, definitely I've told the audience that we use that tool. Yeah. What you just described is like, I mean, that's very functional. So can I, to just really think about some of that stuff you said was quite fast, but it's basically a super functional landing page is what allowed you to win by having it shoppable, but also tell the story, and load fast. Is that kind of correct? High level?
Yeah. Keeping it all in one place, but then allowing you to get what you need to confidently make a shopping decision when you get to the shopping area, all while maintaining it, like not adding too many clicks to make it a painful experience.
And what do you think? Do you think, is it true that headlines get read, subheads get skimmed, and paragraphs get skipped?
I think so. That's what I do. Just an anecdote, but I think it's true. We also, back in the day, I used to do a lot of work using like heat mapping tech and taking a lot of time to review it. And it was always really interesting. Like I saw that was true, and you could see where people were spending. Like that's another kind of tidbit in case people are wanting a more visual viewpoint of why something is or isn't working. There were moments where we would kill a section of a long form landing page because we saw people were moving really fast past it. They'd skim it. They weren't interested, and it was just adding friction, and performance would improve when we removed it. So that's another powerful tool at your disposal.
Just a client of ours that's just like, their site is so simple. There's so much white space. And it's like, single SKU business. How often do I see someone come through the sales process? They're a single SKU business, and it's like there's stuff everywhere, right? There's like text over here and pictures, blah, 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 all this stuff going on. So, I'll just say to the audience, less is often more. And I have seen people be very successful by just showing people exactly what they need to see in exactly the right place and one approach to site iteration. I mean, it's much easier to remove something than to add something new. Right? So if you were looking for a real easy way to optimize your site or your landing pages, just look for the stuff to take out. It's so quick. So what you've said is just sage. And again, we've discussed this a bit in the pod before, but about primary and secondary choke points. I'd love to, maybe you have some tidbits on this to share a bit. But primary choke point, if we think homepage, category page, PDP, cart checkout, primary choke point is they must click on add to cart. They must click on this button. They cannot progress without passing the primary choke point. Secondary choke point is, and this is again theoretical, but if people use this, I think it'd be very powerful for their optimization process. Secondary choke point is the place on the site, other than the primary choke point, that drives the most attention in heat mapping, which could be a good thing or a bad thing, right? It could be like they're focusing on something that's actually harming conversion because it's distracting them, right? Or it could be that, hopefully, your kind of search filters are a secondary choke point. If they're not, it's like, are people actually filtering properly to find what they're looking for? So yeah, I wonder, if you had if that made anything come to mind on how you might use that model to improve, some aspect of a website or a landing page.
It did, because when you think about trying to assign KPIs to understanding that more, you raised a really good point that by removing that part of the page that I mentioned, we might very well also skip, someone might skim anyways, and they might just want to feel more comfortable by skimming and seeing all this stuff that like reviews, it verifies that this is legit, and like depending on your audience, like all that kind of stuff, right? And so it's hard to know, like, is that the right decision? But like what you can do is if you're running an A/B test and you have the ability to see like time on page, your CTR, your like what's happening when you do remove that and keep going and compare it against that control, you can start to actually get that level of clarity through the lens of the primary and secondary choke point too, because there is a little bit of murkiness there sometimes, and it can be tough. You don't want to get stuck on that decision. So again, this is why using a landing page I think is so powerful. A lot of the time with these tools, it's pretty quick and easy to duplicate and remove a section, and then get that spun up in your ads as well. So you can move pretty fast.
Interesting point there is like, so they might, it's like, okay, if paragraphs are skipped, why do we have paragraphs in landing pages? Because if the page is only headline, people are gonna be like, what is this? And it's like, it's almost like you need to see it there to know that there's something real going on here. But interestingly, now that you've got AI slop, it could be just all AI slop, and you see it and you think, oh, this is something real because this thing that I'm going to skip is there. So it's like that's going to probably change optimization in some way, right?
It's crazy. Yeah, I didn't even think about that. Like the way the like AI plays a part in all of this too, and like how the readability is for that. Even like you might want to scan a sentence and be like, that's also not AI. Like I can tell someone wrote that and this feels real. Like there might be an audience that responds a certain way to that, right? So
look, we face this in email because we know that the majority of people, like the majority, do not scroll below the fold. A majority stay only on the primary portion of the page. But we also know that when someone's shown intent, they are paying attention to everything. And so we want to present ourselves professionally for people who do scroll below the fold. Because if someone has been shopping and wants to scroll and look at things, yeah, if you just show them just a picture of someone smiling with the product and a button, it's going to be like, well, who are these guys? And so there's this ties into landing pages too, is like, how much is performative?
Yeah, totally. Because it's like, the way I kind of think about it too is like, if you're going to look at like a house, your ad might be like the curb appeal. And then when you go behind the hood, you go inside, that's the landing page, step 2. And you're really looking around and you're like, that's where you envision yourself like truly living somewhere. And so like, you raise a really good point. You gotta show up at that step 2. And the whole point of a landing page is to do that better than you, like more deeper and less of a surface level approach than you might just be getting from the website. So,
hey, awesome. It was great to have you on the pod. Maybe we'll have you on again. And it's nice because this is actually a great little warm up, everyone on an audience land, for me to come and bring you a model, a more formalized model that some of you can use if you're trying to make sense of your website. If you're an entrepreneur, executive, or out there and you've got an in-house team, hey, great. We're happy for you to just tell a friend about the podcast and work with that in-house team to just improve e-commerce and shopping online for everyone. So thank you very much for having you on, and have a good weekend.
Thanks so much, Jordan. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for listening to today's episode. If you're not getting the D2C newsletter, you can subscribe for free at directtoconsumer.co. And if you want to learn more about Pilothouse's all-killer, no-filler services, take off to pilothouse.co. I'm Eric Dick, and this has been the D2C Podcast. We'll see you next time.